think this is a great time to bring up one of my favorite areas of conversation when it comes to football, and that's what we call FBI, which you know as well as I do is not the service coming to get us, but it is that football IQ. And no position has more mental weight on it than the quarterback position. And
Right.
yet, I think a lot of the times the casual fan doesn't get to appreciate what it is and how you can kind of read those defenses. So Matt, I would love it if you could give everyone listening some insight of your FBI. What made you special? What were some of your favorite things to pick up on?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's great. And so many people, football is physical, and but at the quarterback position, it's really more mental than anything because you get to that level, you're obviously physically gifted. You can throw the football, but for me, one of my strengths, and it really was always the mental part. I always felt like I understood defenses. I could pick up. I did have a photographic memory, so I could look at the install plays and then kind of visualize how it plays out in the field, and you could watch film. So that was something that because I lacked the arm strength, I lacked really the physical athleticism, so I had to make up for it in other areas. But I think just to give the listeners just kind of an idea of, listen, you could call one play in the huddle, but how many different nuances and how many different layers to that play there are, for a quarterback as he walks up to the line of scrimmage. So for me, you could just take a simple, a pass concept, a curl flat, maybe a backside dig, say four wide receivers, but there's a lot of built-ins there that are going through our mind as a quarterback. So the first thing for me, and people don't realize this, and Jen, this, obviously we have about 2 seconds, 2 seconds, maybe less, sometimes maybe more if you have a good offensive line to make a decision. While those big dudes are coming after you, trying to kill you in the pocket. So I think the first thing, first things you're always taught as a quarterback is the three layers. You have the D line, the first layer, the linebacker, kind of that second layer, and then the back end is the secondary. And what I always did is kind of you kind of see through 1, 2, 3. You're not staring at a D end, and then staring. You're kind of looking at
You
all of
better
them
not
together.
be.
Yeah, well, no, you better, if you are, you're in deep, what. So I think the first thing is, for a quarterback, and everyone listens, like, hey, we have to identify a front. Is it a 3-man front? Is this a 4-man front? Because that coincides with our protection and who's hot and who the offensive line is picking up or who we're pointing out as the Mike linebacker. Those are all things that as you kind of walk up to the huddle to try and figure that out. And that's all game plan throughout the week. Who are the down linemen? And obviously the defenses at the NFL level are so intricate, and you have these hybrid players that can rush the passer or drop in. It's becoming more and more challenging for a quarterback. So the first is identifying that kind of front. And then you look at, the linebacker alignment. Are they shifted over? Is it a 4-3? All of those things. And then in the back end, really the safety rotation from a youth standpoint, kind of high school and even college, really the safeties will sort of, for the most part, dictate kind of where the pressure is coming from or what the defense is, because at some point they have to move at the snap of the football, whether it's single high, cover 1 or cover 2, and so on and so forth. And then all of that, you're looking at the corners because you're like, do you have press? Do you have off coverage? Do you have man? Do you have zone? Are the corners kind of shaded in? Are they playing outside leverage? So all of that you have to really dissect as you're really walking to the line of scrimmage. There's a lot of there's a lot of studying that goes on throughout the week, a lot of game plan, a lot of tips. I think as we're talking about kind of football IQ, if they have a shaded nose, which means the defender who's over the center, then typically numbers in your head that you really Sam linebacker is going to blitz. That means I'm going to get cover 3. That means I'm going to go with the football to the curl flat side. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, just what goes through our mind. And sometimes, and even in the run game has gotten so much more intricate now because you're running away from safeties or you run away from pressure, or you package a run play with the pass play in the huddle. So there's a lot. I could talk about this for a long time. There's a lot that goes on to it.
Yeah.
But I think the more prepared you are, and that's why I always I admire, the guys like Tom Brady, and just obviously he's the greatest, but all these guys who are just so, they walk up to the line and they just know. And Kurt Warner, and I'll reference him a lot just because I played with him for 4 years. He was the best at that I saw that I played with. He just knew as he walked up, he always had an answer right away. He always had an answer. And that was just because he was really just smarter than everybody on the field, and he was just so well prepared. So a lot goes on, a lot goes into the process of a play, and just a simple play. And there's some plays where you go up and you line up and you maybe go quick count and you kind of just get the ball out fast, some of the 3-step stuff. But there's a lot that goes into it for sure, and all that, and we're trying to avoid not getting crushed in the pocket.
Right. Hey, and one of my favorites and conversations I have to give people a lot, and I think you'll appreciate this, is you always get talks with an interception that it was on the quarterback.
Right,
and yet
right.
A lot of the times when you see it, it might have been the receiver didn't know that they had to break on the hot route. Can you just touch on that a little bit? Because I think quarterback, obviously you're the quarterback, you're all eyes on you. And yet a lot of the casual fans don't really understand that it may not always be what it seems.
No, that's a great point. And as a quarterback, I would, we take blame. You should take blame for those interceptions, and you say that's on me and we'll handle it. But as you mentioned, especially at the end, especially as you get, to the NFL and the professional level, because everyone is so good and everyone is the best at what they do in the world. And those windows are smaller and the timing. So the most important thing, we talked about kind of the attributes of a quarterback and what makes them great. Well, as you got to the NFL, one of my coaches, Greg Knapp, who's still in the NFL, has been around for a long time. One of the best quarterback coaches I had, in my professional career. It was timing, decision-making, and accuracy, were the 3 things that he lived by. And just if you have those, you're going to have success. Obviously, a lot more goes into it, but timing is the most important thing, because these receivers, what to answer your point is getting to your proper depths, in every single route in the route tree, receivers have to get to a certain depth, or on and out, you got to get 10 to 12. You get to 10, you put your foot in the ground and you round to 12. We're expected to throw. Hey, we're going to throw it to a spot. If you're not there, it's incomplete. If you're there too early, or if you cut off the route, it's probably a pick 6, because we're expecting you to get to that point. And that goes for every single route, a deep in route, where we see a lot in the NFL. These receivers are taught, maybe it's 18 to 20, sometimes it's 14 to 16. But if they don't get to those depths and we throw the ball to where we think they're going to be, that's going to result in, an incomplete pass, or a lot of times an interception. And because those defensive backs are so good. And remember, the defensive backs study film too, and the linebackers study film too. So they want to get a read on the routes that we run as an offense. So, I don't know that it's funny you asked that, because we did this percentage. We did this, one of Urban Meyer's segments on our show last year at Fox, for our big new kickoff show, was really the percentage of interceptions that are not the quarterback's fault, which he loves quarterbacks, but it was actually pretty mind-boggling. And he had these charts, and sometimes that's because maybe a receiver splits, or maybe there's press coverage, so it disrupts the timing. But so that's why you always see, it's so important, the workouts in the off season, and to develop that chemistry, and you practice these plays religiously. I mean, you run a slant route, which is like day one install, which is what I coach my 14-year-old, like they run slants, but you run it so many times that it becomes second nature in a game. So yeah, it's and by the way, the quarterback is to blame for a lot of them as well. Sometimes we'll make an errant throw, sometimes we'll miss a read, sometimes we won't see a defender, but that's why it's so important, the timing and just working with your receivers. That's why even last year I thought it was so impressive, because there was no really training camp. There was no camp. You look what Brady and the Bucs did. I mean, he didn't really have a chance to work out with his receivers more than maybe a couple weeks, and that's why sometimes it takes a long time to get going. But Yeah, it's a great point, and a lot of people need to understand that there's a lot of details, fine details that go into these pass concepts and the timing between a quarterback and the receiver.